Hello and welcome to another episode of this Legend of Korra Book 3 review series. This episode we're talking about The Stakeout. This episode was filled with a lot of exposition and details about our antagonists and all sorts of things. Really complex issues were talked about in this episode that I really wouldn't have expected from Legend of Korra. I mean, the Avatar series has always been a animated show that has kind of pushed the boundaries of what you can show on kids, kids television programs. But we have a small chat about anarchism in this episode, which was really surprising. We'll get into that in a minute. Let's just kind of run down some of the plot details that we need to know about. So basically, Aiwei's ran away, and they're chasing after him using Naga to track him down. And they come into this Misty Palm Springs. I might have gotten that wrong. I forgot to write down the name of the place. But they come to this small town in the middle of a desert. And one of the things they discover here is that they've got wanted posters all over the place. The Earth Queen has put out a warrant for their arrest. Another thing you notice is that there's just loads of spirits just hanging about, just doing whatever. And people aren't happy about them. It's worth noting that I don't really have much to say about. Like, there are some slight immigration parallels going on there, but they're not drawing too much attention to it, at least in this episode. But like the whole scene where the guy shoos some spirits out with a brush and goes, we only serve humans here. It's like, okay. There are some like immigration parallels there of all these people coming in and disrupting, what we've got going on. That's I hope they explore that further. The spirits have kind of taken a back seat this season, but I don't really have a problem with, because what we've seen so far has been excellent. But I'd like to have more details about what they're doing with the spirits and what they're kind of meant to represent. At the moment, as I said, immigration parallels going on, but there's not much more going on at the moment. There's this weird scene with fans of Bolin, which feels like Mike and Brian commenting on Avatar fans about how much they find them intimidating and scary at times, which is fine. Every creator has their fanatical fans. I like to think I'd be a little less creepy than those guys if I met Mike and Brian, but you never know. But anyway, so they find Aiwei in this. That's all the of side details covered that stuff. Now let's get into the meat of this episode. So they find Aiwei. They know that he's in the town and he's rented some room or something, and they decide to rent the room directly opposite so they can basically watch what he does, watch what moves he takes, blah 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 blah, so that they can follow him to find the rest of the Red Lotus, because they believe that Aiwei is going to meet the Red Lotus at some point. And so you have this scene of Katara, Marco and Bolin and Asami all held up in this room together, just watching Aiwei's room and seeing what if he does anything, if he's going to move off somewhere else and meet the Red Lotus. Now, a scene that occurs while these guys are in this room is Bolin and Asami start having a Pai Sho match with each other. And this scene is genius because it says so much about what the show is about, and also what's going to happen later on in this episode. But in such a short amount of time and with such a simple metaphor. So basically what happens is Bolin and Asami find out that their ways of playing Pai Sho are very different. Bolin's learnt street Pai Sho, which is very fast and not much time for strategy, whereas Asami has learned a different style of Pai Sho, which requires deep, thoughtful maneuvers. And it turns out that when they read the instructions, that Pai Sho actually has many different rules depending on what region of the world you're in and what culture you're a part of. There are many different interpretations of the same game. There are many different interpretations of how things should be run. It's a microcosm of the issue that's going to be raised later on in this episode of politics, of how the world should be run, how nations should be run, how people should be led. There are many different interpretations of what is right and what is wrong, and the significance of it being Pai Sho is obviously it's connected to the White Lotus. And what we discover later on is that Zaheer has formed the Red Lotus, which is a different interpretation of what the White Lotus should be doing. It's a different interpretation of what is morally right, a different interpretation of what is right for the world. And this idea that the way the world should be run, the way nations should behave, the way, what morality is, the show is trying to tell you it's different things to different people. And you can't have hard and fast rules for morality. You just can't, because these things mean different things to different people. And there's the scene where Bolin basically goes to Korra, you need to standardize all these rules for Pai Sho. And basically what the creators, the writers are telling you is this is what the world is asking of the Avatar. The world is asking the Avatar to standardize morality, to standardize the rules and mechanisms in which nations and countries interact with each other, and all of that. But it's an impossible task. It's an impossible task to accomplish. And that's why there has to be this Avatar every generation. It's a constant battle, because balance is not about everything following a certain code. It's about what works for that time period. It's about what works for those people in that situation, in that culture. And I thought that was really, really impressive. I shouldn't be surprised. The show has done stuff like this before. The Guru episode from The Last Airbender is an obvious example of them exploring quite complex themes. But I was taken aback by how deep and meaningful that metaphor ended up being, especially when we, finally have the conversation between Zaheer and Korra, and we find out what Zaheer's objective ultimately is. So basically what happens after that is Korra storms into Aiwei's room. It turns out Aiwei's meditating, and Korra figures out, wait, he's not meeting the Red Lotus in the real world. He's meeting Zaheer or the Red Lotus or whatever in the spirit world. So she goes into the spirit world, and yes, she's correct. Aiwei and Zaheer are meeting in the spirit world, but then Zaheer almost immediately after a short conversation with Aiwei, throws Aiwei into the fog of lost souls. Aiwei's dead. That's the thing that the show just avoids saying, but he is dead. That was a way of Zaheer killing somebody without him actually killing someone on kids' television. Which was, I always love when kids' shows try and find a way around the rules of what they can and cannot show. Because if his spirit is lost in the spirit world for all time, his physical body's just going to die. So Aiwei's dead now, effectively. And then, Zaheer and Korra are on their own. And what Zaheer decides to do is they don't engage in each other in combat. Zaheer just sits down and says, "Korra, ask me whatever questions you want to ask me. What, you deserve. We've been chasing you. You deserve to know what's going on." And then what follows this is Zaheer just going off on this long monologue with the occasional input from Korra about what the Red Lotus is, what his goals are, and what they want to do. So the Red Lotus, essentially, they believe they are what the White Lotus should be, and that the White Lotus lost their sense of direction, that after the 100-Year War, the White Lotus became glorified bodyguards, and a great man called Aiwei broke away from the White Lotus and formed a new society. And it turns out that what this group is dedicated to is Buddhist anarchism. Basically, they never say Buddhist anarchism in the show, but that's what it is. They do not believe in nations, in governments. They believe in disorder being the natural order, that people should govern govern themselves, and whatever happens, whatever chaos ensues, that's the way the world was meant to be, and the governments and world leaders and all that are inherently evil. There are some other details you also discover that Unalaq was part of the Red Lotus, and that when the Red Lotus tried to kidnap Korra when she was quite a young child, Unalaq was part of that. But when the 4 members that we're familiar with got captured and locked up, Unalaq covered up his involvement and then pursued his own selfish goals. So you find out that opening the spirit gates, the spirit portals, was part of the Red Lotus's plan, but unleashing Vaatu and forming a dark avatar was not part of their plan. And I have to say, I really love that the Red Lotus are like, yeah, screw that guy. Like, Unalaq sucked. Like, we don't like Unalaq. He was just a selfish dick. Like, we don't like that guy. Because I didn't like Unalaq, so it's really nice having these great villains go, yeah, that guy sucked. We don't like him. Zaheer is turning out to be one of my favourite antagonists of this universe. He's not fitting, because it's so easy, like loads of fantasy shows and what have you, it's so easy to have an antagonist who's just a psychopath or just crazy. Zaheer doesn't come off as a psychopath or crazy. He does come off as a ruthless pragmatist. That he definitely is. He is an ends justifies the means type of fellow, but he isn't without compassion. He isn't without empathy. He's not selfish. He genuinely believes what he's doing is for the betterment of humankind, of society. He's rational. He's in control. He's not fitting. Like, I like Azula. Azula's one of the better villains of this series, but she's a psychopath, and I'm not saying, like, psychopaths are real, that they're a real thing. People without without a conscience are very real and frightening, but it's very easy to fall back on that. It's very easy to go, well, they're a psychopath, and that explains their actions. When you have a character like Zaheer, who believes with a conviction that he is benefiting the world through his actions, that's almost scarier, because he's thought it through. He's considered the impact of what he's doing. He's been conflicted morally about what he's doing. So the fact that in spite of all of that he presses on, that's frightening, because you're dealing with somebody who's convinced that they're right and that you are wrong, and there's no reasoning with that. Or at least you have more of a chance of reasoning with Zaheer than you have with, say, Azula. But you're not going to convince him that what he's doing is wrong. Azula might actually admit that, yes, what I'm doing is wrong, because she's a psychopath, she just doesn't care. Whereas Zaheer, it's more like, ends justify the means. I don't want to kill people, but if I have to, I will, and that's because it's better for everyone. Yeah, just the less so the other the other three members. We haven't really got a chance to get to know those guys. They're kind of just an extension of Zaheer's will. But Zaheer himself is turning out to be a fascinating character. Just his philosophies and views on the world. It turns out that the reason why they wanted to capture the Avatar was to basically train her in their views on the world and so forth and so on, to show the Avatar what they consider to be a better path for the world to go down. But like in the first episode, he said the end of the Avatar, which makes me think, is he lying to Korra? And also there's the added fact that he's actually just using this whole speech to distract Korra so he can send two of his guys to capture her. Ultimately, that's unsuccessful. The Earth Queen is actually the one who captures Korra and Asami. And the Red Lotus have Mako and Bolin. But it does tell the audience that Zaheer is kind of two-faced. He might say one thing and mean something else. So it does mean we're not entirely sure what he's saying is true, but the way it was performed by Henry Rollins, who by the way is a perfect choice for Zaheer, and just the way it was scripted, it felt like Zaheer was being honest with Korra. This is how I feel. This is what I believe. It's just he was using that opportunity to further his own goals. Again, ruthless pragmatist. Yeah, just an excellent episode. Book 3 has been fantastic. I've been really impressed, and Book 2 I thought was good. Had some serious problems though. Book 3 is more than made up for that. I was really worried that Korra was just gonna meander into mediocrity, but that hasn't happened. It's getting as good as the original series was, and I'm really happy about that. So, yeah, I'm really excited for the next episode. I'll see you then. Bye.